I want a divorce, Henry. Annabelle's voice cracked like a whip as she stormed through the doorway, instantly plunging Henry into a fog of confusion. Last night was my birthday, Henry. Why did you have to ruin it with that sulky face? Now all my friends are saying I've married a cheapskate. She flung her designer handbag onto the plush sofa, her beautiful face contorted with fury. 5-year-old Lily, mimicking her mother perfectly, stomped her little foot, her brow furrowed in a miniature version of Annabelle's anger. Divorce. The word hung heavy in the air. Annabelle, in all their years together, had never uttered it before, not even during their most heated arguments. A cold dread coiled in Henry's stomach. He poured her a glass of water, hoping to diffuse the volatile situation, but Annabelle's hand flashed out, sending the glass flying across the room, shattering against the wall. Richard just came to wish me happy birthday, Henry. He even brought a gift. And how did you treat him? Annabelle's voice dripped with indignation. Yeah, Daddy was so mean. Uncle Richard didn't even get to eat cake before he left. You're awful, Daddy. Lily chimed in, her small voice echoing her mother's resentment. Henry's mind flashed back to the previous evening. He had spent hours preparing Annabelle's birthday party, meticulously arranging everything, wanting it to be perfect. Annabelle had invited her usual circle of glamorous friends, and the party had flowed smoothly, filled with laughter and chatter, until Richard Carter arrived. Richard, Annabelle's first love. The moment Henry saw him, a familiar knot of insecurity tightened in his chest. Richard, with his easy charm and undeniable charisma, always seemed to cast a shadow over Henry's more grounded, dependable nature. Despite the unease, Henry had plastered on a smile and extended a welcoming hand. But Richard, instead of a polite greeting, had leaned in close, his breath hot against Henry's ear, and whispered a chillingly confident challenge. Believe me, Henry, Annabelle will be leaving with me tonight. The blatant provocation, the smug smirk playing on Richard's lips, ignited a spark of anger in Henry. He shoved Richard back, perhaps a little too forcefully, a primal urge to defend his territory surging within him. Instantly, Annabelle had rounded on him, her eyes blazing. Henry, what is wrong with you? Richard is our guest. She had rushed to Richard's side, pushing Henry aside as if he were a misbehaving child, shielding Richard with her own body. Annabelle, perhaps Henry doesn't want me here. I should probably leave. You all enjoy the party, Richard had said, his voice laced with faux-wounded martyrdom. He turned to leave, his exit perfectly timed for maximum dramatic effect. Uncle Richard, don't go. Lily had wailed, her small face crumpled with distress as she watched Richard's retreating back. Annabelle had glared at Henry, her beautiful face contorted with a rage he rarely saw directed at him. With a sweep of her arm, she had sent the birthday cake, a masterpiece of confectionery art he'd painstakingly chosen, crashing to the floor, a sickening splat of color against the pristine white tiles. Then, grabbing Lily's hand, she had stormed out, abandoning her guests, her party, and Henry to the wreckage. The remaining guests, caught in the crossfire of their marital drama, had exchanged awkward glances before quietly filtering out. Henry was left, alone, amidst the sticky, sugary chaos, to clean up the remnants of a birthday celebration turned sour. Mother and daughter hadn't returned that night, and now, here they were, back with a humble box of Swiss rolls, and Annabelle was demanding a divorce. Richard provoked me first, Henry said, his voice tight with a mixture of frustration and hurt, knowing even as he spoke that his explanation would fall on deaf ears. Are you still jealous about me making him soup the other day? I told you he wasn't feeling well. It was a small gesture, Henry. Are you really going to hold on to something so insignificant? Annabelle scoffed, her eyes rolling with dramatic exasperation. There's nothing dirty between Richard and me, Henry. Honestly, are you even a man? Annabelle launched into a tirade of past grievances, her voice rising in pitch and volume, her eyes icy with disdain. Daddy, you have to apologize to Uncle Richard, or I won't forgive you, Lily declared, her small arms crossed defiantly. Uncle Richard took Mommy and me to the beach last night. We had a huge cake, much bigger than the one you bought, and he bought me so many yummy treats. You never let me have treats. I don't like you anymore, Daddy," Lily continued, her voice dripping with childish petulance, listing Richard's perceived virtues and Henry's supposed failings. "All you do is make me do homework. All you do is scold me. Humph. Mean Daddy," Lily finished, sticking out her tongue at him. Listening to Lily's relentless accusations, fueled by Annabelle's resentment and Richard's calculated manipulations, a wave of profound defeat washed over Henry. His attempts to instill discipline, to guide Lily towards healthy habits and academic success, were now twisted into weapons against him. "Henry, you will apologize to Richard immediately, or I swear, I am done with you." Annabelle scooped Lily into her arms and swept out of the room, slamming the bedroom door with resounding finality. The next morning, Henry rose early as usual, his movements mechanical as he prepared breakfast for Annabelle and Lily. He laid the table, arranged their favorite cereals, brewed fresh coffee, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy in the increasingly fractured atmosphere. But the silence at the breakfast table was thick with unspoken resentment. Annabelle and Lily, united in their displeasure, pointedly ignored him, their faces set in stony masks of disapproval. He ventured a weak smile, a desperate attempt to bridge the widening chasm between them. Lily responded with a withering eye roll that mirrored her mother's disdain. "Mommy, I don't want Daddy to take me to school. He hasn't apologized to Uncle Richard," Lily announced, planting her small hands on her hips, turning her back to Henry with theatrical indignation. "I don't want him driving me to work either. Let's go, Lily," Annabelle declared, grabbing Lily's hand and marching towards the door. Leaving Henry standing alone in the kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee now tinged with the bitter scent of impending loss. From the window, Henry watched them descend the steps of their house. And then he saw him. Richard was waiting for them at the curb, leaning against his sleek, expensive car, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips as he opened the car door for Annabelle and Lily. A fresh wave of anger, hot and suffocating, surged through Henry. In the past, their arguments, though frequent, had always been fleeting storms, quickly dissipating, leaving behind a sense of fragile peace. Perhaps, Henry thought, he was simply being overly sensitive, reading too much into Annabelle's actions and Richard's presence. Trying to quell the rising tide of anxiety, Henry reached for his phone, scrolling through his order history. The designer handbag he had ordered for Annabelle, a belated birthday gift, should be arriving today. A peace offering, a gesture of reconciliation. He hoped, with a desperate flicker of optimism, that it would be enough to smooth things over, to rewind them back to some semblance of their former life. That evening, Henry presented the handbag to Annabelle. A flicker of genuine pleasure, a rare and precious sight these days, softened her features. He then produced Lily's long-coveted sparkly shoes, and for the first time in days, Lily's face lit up with childish delight, and she threw her arms around his neck, calling him Daddy, with a warmth that melted the ice around his heart momentarily. "Daddy, do you know why Uncle Richard gave Mommy Swiss rolls?" Lily asked, snuggling into his lap, a Swiss roll clutched in her hand. Henry shook his head, prompting her to continue. "Uncle Richard said Swiss rolls were the first gift he ever gave Mommy when they first met, and Mommy became his girlfriend, and then Uncle Richard, to celebrate his love with Mommy, opened a factory, a Swiss roll factory. Isn't that romantic, Daddy?" Lily recited the rehearsed lines with a childish earnestness that was both heartbreaking and infuriating. Watching Lily parrot Richard's carefully crafted narrative, Henry felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. A 6-year-old couldn't possibly grasp the concept of romance. These were Richard's words, planted in Lily's innocent mind, designed to undermine Henry, to glorify himself in Annabelle's eyes. "Daddy, Uncle Richard opened a factory for Mommy. What have you ever done for Mommy?" Lily asked, her wide, innocent eyes fixed on him, echoing Richard's manipulative question. The pieces clicked into place. The constant stream of Swiss rolls that had become their go-to gifts for family and friends over the past 2 years. Annabelle's almost evangelical promotion of the brand, recommending them to everyone she knew. It wasn't just about the Swiss rolls. It was about Richard. It was about subtly, persistently weaving Richard back into their lives, into their family, into Annabelle's heart. Silly girl, what nonsense are you talking about? Annabelle snatched Lily from his lap, her smile strained, her eyes darting nervously towards Henry, as if suddenly realizing the dangerous territory Lily had unwittingly stumbled into. Henry sat in the living room, the weight of realization crushing him, the saccharine sweetness of the Swiss rolls now leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. After Annabelle's grudging acceptance of his peace offering, the routine of Henry taking Lily to school resumed. One evening, Henry was tasked with entertaining important clients, a crucial meeting for securing a major contract. The evening stretched late, fueled by copious amounts of alcohol. He finally clinched the deal, but at a steep personal cost. He collapsed, racked with agonizing stomach cramps, diagnosed with acute gastroenteritis, and rushed to the hospital. Through waves of pain, Henry fumbled for his phone, desperately trying to reach Annabelle. Call after call went unanswered. Finally, on the 9th attempt, she picked up. "Annabelle, it's me. I'm in the hospital, acute gastroenteritis. Please come." Henry gasped, his voice weak and strained with pain. "Henry, are you serious? What nonsense are you spouting? What's wrong with your stomach? Why are you lying to me?" Annabelle's voice exploded with disbelief and anger, her words hitting him like a physical blow. He was too weak and confused to understand her accusations. "Daddy, you're so annoying. I don't like you." Lily's petulant voice echoed in the background, a chorus of rejection accompanying Annabelle's fury. "Henry, can you please stop with this ridiculous drama? Are you really that jealous? If you're going to make a scene over nothing, then just consider us divorced." Annabelle slammed the phone down, leaving Henry alone in his hospital bed, reeling in pain and confusion. The puzzle pieces, however, soon began to fall into place. He scrolled through his social media, and there it was. Richard Carter's latest post, a smug, self-satisfied update. "My stomach's a little off," and they instantly rushed to my side. "It's wonderful to feel so cared for. A thoughtful little angel and a sweet darling. Hashtag blessed, hashtag family, hashtag feeling loved." Attached were photos. Photos of Annabelle bustling around Richard's kitchen, stirring a pot of congee, her face etched with concern. Photos of Lily, perched on a stool, carefully placing a hot water bottle on Richard's stomach, her brow furrowed with worry. Scenes of domestic tenderness, scenes of nurturing care, scenes that Henry had never experienced, never received from his own wife and daughter. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. It was all so incredibly, painfully laughable. The next 2 days blurred into a haze of pain and loneliness in the sterile confines of the hospital. Annabelle and Lily remained conspicuously absent. Not a visit, not a call, not even a text message of concern. Then, a message pinged on his phone. It was from Annabelle. "Seriously, Henry? Throwing a tantrum and running away from home? If you don't want to come back, fine by me. Guess that saying is true. If someone doesn't care about you, they wouldn't notice if you were hanging upside down." The casual cruelty of her words, the chilling indifference to his well-being, amplified the physical pain tenfold. The online saying she quoted, a dismissive, callous remark about emotional neglect, resonated with a brutal accuracy. "Uncle, Mommy said hot porridge is good for tummy aches. This is Mommy's porridge, still warm. She said if you're not feeling well, you should drink something warm to make you feel better." A small, hesitant voice spoke beside his bed. Henry looked up. It was a little girl, no older than Lily, holding out a steaming bowl of congee. Her name was Emily, the daughter of his roommate, Mrs. Davis. Emily's mother, Mrs. Davis, nodded at him with a kind smile. He accepted the bowl, the warmth spreading through his chilled hands, a small gesture of human kindness cutting through the icy isolation that had enveloped him. The congee, simple and unassuming, brought a surprising comfort, both physical and emotional. He thanked Emily and Mrs. Davis, a genuine warmth blossoming in his chest. Later, chatting with Emily, he learned she was also 5 years old, Lily's age. But the similarities ended there. Emily was quiet, considerate, and remarkably well-behaved for her age. A stark contrast to Lily's often demanding and spoiled behavior. A nagging doubt began to surface. Had he failed as a father? Had his parenting style somehow contributed to Lily's increasingly entitled and unkind nature? He unlocked his phone again. Another compulsive scroll through social media. There was Richard Carter's latest post, a series of photos depicting a cozy domestic scene. Richard, beaming, was preparing breakfast for Annabelle and Lily. The way to a woman's heart is through her stomach, and a sweet little angel by your side doesn't hurt either. Feeling incredibly blessed. Hashtag family goals, hashtag breakfast, hashtag daddy duties. Lily, in the photos, was radiant, her face smeared with jam, her eyes sparkling with happiness. The image pierced Henry like a shard of ice. A wave of profound sadness, laced with a bitter undercurrent of resentment, washed over him. Their life, until recently, had been adequate, comfortable. They weren't wealthy, but they were financially secure. They had a beautiful daughter, a wife who, despite her occasional vanities, had always seemed fundamentally solid, dependable. He had always considered himself content, even blessed. Then, Richard Carter had re-entered their lives 2 years ago. Initially, Henry had dismissed it as harmless nostalgia. Lily was already 5 years old. Surely, Annabelle wouldn't jeopardize their family for a fleeting rekindling of a teenage romance? He had underestimated the potent allure of first love. Annabelle had started meeting Richard secretly, taking Lily along, initially under the guise of catching up with an old friend. Henry had discovered their clandestine meetings by chance, an unexpected encounter at a local park. He had confronted Annabelle, his anger erupting in a volcanic outburst. Annabelle had vehemently denied any wrongdoing, accusing him of being insecure and distrustful. Then, the secrecy had dissolved, replaced by an open, almost defiant, flirtation. Richard began showering Lily with forbidden treats, sugary snacks and candies that Henry strictly limited for health reasons. Lily's perfect baby. Teeth had rapidly deteriorated, riddled with cavities. Henry had lost his temper again, confronting Annabelle, pleading with her to see the damage Richard was causing, both to their daughter's health and to their family dynamic. It's just cavities, Henry. Every kid gets cavities. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Annabelle had retorted dismissively, brushing aside his concerns, continuing to indulge Lily's every whim, encouraged by Richard's constant stream of gifts and attention. As a man, Henry understood Richard's intentions perfectly. He had tried to reason with Annabelle, to set boundaries, to protect his family from Richard's insidious influence. But Annabelle had become increasingly resentful, their home a battleground of silent treatments and simmering tension. Lily, caught in the middle, had learned to weaponize her affection, showering Richard with adoration while treating Henry with growing disdain. He had compromised, conceded, and yielded time and time again. For the sake of peace, for the sake of his marriage, for the sake of his daughter. And this was where it had led him. Discharged from the hospital, Henry returned to the office. He was met with an unsettling silence, a palpable shift in the office atmosphere. His colleagues, once friendly and convivial, now avoided his gaze, their whispers and hushed conversations following him like shadows. Didn't you know? Annabelle quit. Said she's going to work for Richard Carter, a colleague finally revealed, confirming Henry's worst fears. Said something about needing a change, a fresh start. Henry's fists clenched, a knot of anger tightening in his chest. That evening, Henry confronted Annabelle. Why? Why would you do this? What will people think? He demanded, his voice raw with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. Annabelle shrugged, applying a face mask, her eyes cold and distant. Richard needs help. He offered me a position. Work is work, Henry. What difference does it make where I work? It's not the same thing, Annabelle. I forbid it. Henry insisted, his voice rising in desperation. Who are you to forbid me? I already quit. I can work wherever I please. It's none of your business. Annabelle snapped, her tone dismissive, her gaze fixed on her reflection in the mirror, oblivious to his pain. Please, Annabelle, don't do this, Henry pleaded, reaching for her hand, a desperate attempt to salvage their crumbling marriage. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was more than just a job. This was the final nail in the coffin of their relationship. I am going to work for Richard, and there's nothing you can do about it, Annabelle retorted, shaking off his hand, turning away from him, her back rigid with resolve. He's successful, Henry. He's going places. Unlike you, you're nothing. The words, laced with venomous contempt, stung more than any physical blow. The following days were a desolate wasteland of silence. Annabelle and Lily retreated into their own world, their interactions with Henry reduced to curt necessities. The house, once filled with the sounds of family life, now echoed with an oppressive chill. Richard became a daily fixture, picking up Annabelle and Lily for work and school, his presence a constant, taunting reminder of Henry's displacement. You know, I could have Annabelle divorced from you in a heartbeat, and you wouldn't even get to keep Lily, Richard said, his voice laced with smug confidence, blocking Henry's path one morning as Henry was leaving for work. A predatory smile played on Richard's lips. Henry stared back, his face impassive, the fight drained out of him. He couldn't muster the energy to deny Richard's words, to feign a confidence he no longer possessed. Richard, sensing his defeat, chuckled, a sound of pure, unadulterated triumph, and sauntered towards his car, leaving Henry standing alone, hollowed out and defeated. That afternoon, a call came from Lily's school. Mr. Song, we were expecting you for Lily's parent-teacher conference. Are you still coming? Parent-teacher conference? Henry had received no notification, no invitation. I wasn't aware, Henry stammered, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. It's important for both parents to attend, Mr. Song. Please come as soon as you can, the teacher urged. Henry dropped everything and rushed to the school. But the scene that unfolded in the school gymnasium stole the last vestiges of strength from his limbs. Richard was there. Richard, not Henry, was sitting beside Annabelle and Lily. They were playing a game, laughing, a picture of domestic bliss, a perfect family tableau. Lily, perched on Richard's lap, was calling him Daddy, her voice ringing with unadulterated joy. Henry stood on the periphery, an invisible ghost, an unwelcome intruder in their carefully constructed fantasy. Other parents murmured admiringly, praising their family unity, their obvious love. The teacher, however, wore a mask of barely concealed shock and confusion. Henry approached them, his footsteps heavy, his heart leaden. Annabelle's smile faltered, replaced by a cold, dismissive glare. Richard doesn't have any children of his own. His ex-wife, she passed away from cancer. He just wants to experience what it's like to have a family. Don't make a big deal out of it, Annabelle explained, her voice laced with impatience, as if Henry were being deliberately obtuse. I'm helping him fulfill his dream. You can go home now, Henry, Annabelle added, turning back to Richard, her arms snaking through his, possessive and dismissive in equal measure. The casual cruelty of her words, the blatant disregard for his feelings, felt like a physical wound. Uncle Richard is my daddy today. You can leave, Daddy, Lily piped up, pushing Henry away, her small hands surprisingly forceful. Henry looked from Annabelle to Lily, his heart aching with a pain that was almost unbearable. What was he to them now? An obstacle? An inconvenience? A discarded relic of a past they were eager to erase? Perhaps I should be the one to leave. Thank you. Thank you for letting me share your dream, Richard said, his voice dripping with saccharine sweetness, a false martyr sigh escaping his lips. He made a show of standing up, as if prepared to gracefully withdraw from their family moment. Predictably, Annabelle and Lily immediately grabbed his arms, pulling him back, their protests loud and vehement. No, Richard, don't go. Uncle Richard, stay. Henry, can you please just be mature about this? Richard is going through a difficult time. Can't you just be a little understanding? Annabelle pleaded, her voice laced with exasperated impatience. Must you always be so selfish? Daddy, you're mean. I don't like you anymore. I don't want you to be my daddy anymore. Lily shrieked, pounding her small fists against Henry's legs, her face contorted with childish fury. The words, aimed with laser-like precision, pierced the last vestiges of Henry's emotional defenses. He felt a profound sense of detachment, as if watching this scene unfold from a great distance, the pain strangely muted, almost unreal. Why don't you go be Emily's daddy? Her daddy is dead. She doesn't have anyone, Lily suddenly blurted out, pointing towards Emily and Mrs. Davis, who were standing nearby, their faces etched with embarrassment and discomfort. Lily's words, cruel and insensitive, hung in the air, thick with childish malice. Henry finally snapped, a surge of protective anger, directed not at Annabelle or Richard, but at Lily for her shocking cruelty, propelled him forward. He strode towards Lily and, for the first time in her life, he spanked her bottom, a sharp, stinging swat that echoed in the sudden silence. Lily erupted into a torrent of tears, collapsing onto the floor, writhing and wailing. I hate you. I hate you. I don't want you to be my daddy. Lily screamed, her cries echoing through the gymnasium. Richard immediately swooped in, scooping Lily into his arms, cradling her, murmuring soothing words, casting triumphant glances in Henry's direction. Annabelle rounded on Henry, her face contorted with fury. How dare you? How dare you hit your own daughter? Especially in front of everyone, just for defending a little girl you don't even know. You are a terrible father, Henry. You don't deserve to be Lily's father. You disgust me, Henry. I can't believe I ever married you. Annabelle spat, her voice trembling with rage. I want a divorce, and I want it now. Her words, sharp and final, were the third time she had uttered the dreaded word. This time, however, something had shifted within Henry. The pain, the anger, the resentment had coalesced into a cold, hard resolve. The years of compromise, of sacrifice, of unrequited love had reached their breaking point. He nodded, his voice surprisingly calm. Fine, Annabelle. Divorce it is. The words, once unthinkable, now felt liberating, a release from a suffocating burden. Good. About time. If you don't divorce me, you're not a man. Annabelle hissed, grabbing Richard's arm, pulling him and Lily away, back to their game, their laughter echoing in the gymnasium, leaving Henry standing alone, the shattered remnants of his marriage scattered at his feet. Uncle Richard, can you be my daddy now? I love you, Uncle Richard. Lily's voice, sweet and manipulative, drifted back to him. Of course, Lily. I love you too, sweetheart, Richard replied, his voice dripping with false affection, his eyes meeting Henry's across the room, a smug, victorious glint in their depths. He had won. He had taken everything. Richard had indeed won, but Henry realized, with a sense of weary resignation, that he no longer wanted to play the game. He had lost nothing he truly valued. The love he had poured into this marriage, into this family, had been squandered, unappreciated, and ultimately betrayed. Let them have it. Let them have each other. He was done. Uncle, Mommy says when you're sad, candy always makes you feel better. These are all the candies I won playing the game. They're all for you, Uncle. Emily's soft voice broke through his reverie. She offered him a small handful of brightly colored candies, her eyes filled with genuine concern. Henry knelt down, meeting her gaze. Thank you, Emily, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But won't you eat them? Mommy says little girls shouldn't eat too much candy. It's bad for your teeth. I already had one. These are all for you, Uncle. Emily smiled, a sweet, innocent smile that warmed Henry's heart, a stark contrast to Lily's spoiled petulance. He looked at Emily, then back in the direction of Annabelle, Richard, and Lily, their laughter ringing false and hollow in the gymnasium. He had raised Lily for 6 years, poured his love and energy into her. And yet, she had turned on him so easily, so completely, seduced by cheap trinkets and empty promises. Emily, a stranger, offered him more genuine kindness in a single moment than Lily had shown him in months. Enough was enough. Let them go. Let them have their charade of happiness. He had nothing left to give. As expected, Annabelle and Lily did not return home that night. A curt text message arrived the next morning. Be at the Civil Affairs Bureau at 9 a.m. Bring your ID. No, please, no sorry, no vestige of the years they had shared. The next morning, Henry arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau. Richard was already there, beaming, escorting Annabelle and Lily, a picture of smug domesticity. The divorce proceedings were swift, cold, and impersonal. Within an hour, it was done. Divorce certificate in hand, Henry was officially, irrevocably, divorced. Mommy, I don't want him anymore. I want to live with you and my new daddy, Lily declared, her white lie delivered with chilling conviction, cementing her status as a miniature version of her manipulative mother. I don't want the house or the car. You can have them both. Consider it your severance package. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other, Henry said, tossing the car keys to Annabelle, his voice devoid of emotion. Annabelle's eyes widened in surprise. Richard, however, merely smirked, pocketing the keys with undisguised satisfaction. Fine. Consider it child support for the future. And Lily is no longer your daughter, Annabelle retorted, producing a document from her handbag, a termination of parental rights agreement. She thrust it at him, a cold, calculated finality to their broken marriage. Henry scanned the document. Complete severance of parental rights. No further financial obligations. No further contact. No more Lily. Without hesitation, without a flicker of regret, he signed. It was over. Completely, irrevocably over. Mommy, if he signs, will he not be my daddy anymore? Lily asked, peering at the document with childish curiosity. That's right, darling. You won't have to call him daddy anymore, Annabelle confirmed, folding the document, tucking it away with clinical efficiency. Yay. Go away now. I don't like you. I want Uncle Richard to be my daddy, Lily crowed, running to Richard, throwing her arms around his legs. Richard scooped her up, hoisting her onto his shoulders, his triumphant laughter echoing through the sterile hallways of the Civil Affairs Bureau. I told you I'd win, Henry, Richard called out, his voice laced with gloating victory. He had indeed won. But Henry walked away, lighter than he had felt in years, leaving the wreckage of his marriage behind, finally free. That evening, Henry returned to his house, or rather, what used to be his house. His belongings were piled on the porch, haphazardly. Stacked cardboard boxes and overflowing suitcases. The locks had been changed. He was locked out, literally and figuratively. They hadn't wasted any time. The speed with which they had erased him from their lives was almost breathtaking. He checked into a nearby hotel, the sterile anonymity of the room a strange comfort after the emotional turmoil of the past few weeks. Then, inevitably, another notification popped up on his phone. Richard Carter, predictably, had posted again. A gloating update, designed for Henry's eyes only. Persistence pays off. Sometimes, you just have to keep digging until you strike gold. Hashtag never give you up, hashtag winning, hashtag family. Another video followed. Filmed inside his house, his living room, Lily's voice, shrill and saccharine, calling Richard daddy. Annabelle's voice, husky with manufactured affection, calling Richard honey. Hey, buddy, just wanted to let you know. Everything's mine now. House, wife, daughter. Everything. What are you going to do about it? Richard's voice, smug and taunting, dripped with condescending triumph. What was he going to do about it? Nothing. He didn't care anymore. He had given up the fight. He tapped the like button on Richard's post, a silent, ironic acknowledgement of Richard's hollow victory. He packed his suitcase, a small, worn leather bag containing the remnants of his life, and headed to the office to tender his resignation. It was time to leave, to start over, to rebuild his life from the ashes of a love that had never truly been his. It was time to go home. As he walked through the office doors, however, he was met with a wall of whispers, sidelong glances, and hushed conversations. "Look, it's Henry's song. Heard he and Annabelle divorced. Pathetic, isn't it? Jealous of her ex, just because he went to Lily's parent-teacher conference. What a joke." "Yeah, some men just can't handle a strong woman. Richard Carter is way better husband material anyway. He's so thoughtful, so attentive. Annabelle really lucked out. Richard is successful, too. Annabelle really upgraded, didn't she? Poor Henry, though. So insecure." Heads turned, eyes followed him. Whispers trailed in his wake. His colleagues, people he had worked alongside for years, people he had considered friends, were now judging him, gossiping about him, siding with Annabelle and Richard, painting him as the villain in his own life story. The casual cruelty, the unquestioning acceptance of Annabelle's narrative, cut deeper than he had expected. He had always been a helpful colleague, always willing to lend a hand, to offer support. And this was how they repaid him, with judgment, with gossip, with thinly veiled contempt. The realization settled upon him, cold and heavy. He was truly alone, but strangely, amidst the wreckage of his life, a fragile seed of hope began to sprout. Freedom. He was free. Free from Annabelle's manipulations, free from Lily's ingratitude, free from the suffocating weight of a love that had never been reciprocated. He was free to start again, free to build a new life, a life of his own making, a life where he could finally be himself, without compromise, without apology. And for the first time in a long time, Henry felt a faint flicker of optimism. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but it was his road, and he would walk it, head held high, towards an unknown future, a future that, for the first time in years, felt like it belonged to him alone. "I'm filing for divorce, Henry." Annabelle's declaration was as crisp and cold as the winter air seeping through the poorly sealed window, hitting Henry like a physical blow the moment he stepped inside their lavishly decorated apartment. The scent of expensive lilies, usually Annabelle's favorite, now felt cloying, suffocating. "My birthday dinner last night, Henry, was an utter humiliation. Why the long face, the icy silence? My friends are whispering behind their manicured hands, calling me pitted for marrying a miser." She tossed her fur coat onto the velvet chaise lounge, the gesture theatrical, her perfectly made-up face a mask of wounded vanity. 5-year-old Lily, a miniature replica of her mother in temperament and dress, mirrored Annabelle's dramatic sigh, her tiny brow furrowed in imitation of adult displeasure. Divorce. The word hung in the air, heavy and toxic, a stark contrast to the gilded cage they called home. In their 6 years of marriage, spanning from youthful infatuation to comfortable routine, Annabelle had never uttered that word, not even in the heat of their most extravagant arguments about redecorating the Hamptons' summer home or the proper vintage of champagne to serve at their charity galas. A cold dread, sharper than any financial worry he'd ever faced, settled in Henry's gut. He moved to pour her a calming glass of sparkling water, Perrier of course, nothing less would do, but Annabelle's hand lashed out, a blur of perfectly manicured nails, sending the crystal glass spinning across the room, shattering against the imported Italian tile with a sound like their marriage imploding. "Richard came bearing a birthday gift, Henry, a thoughtful, classic Swiss roll, a nostalgic nod to our past. And you treated him like he was a common street peddler. Such rudeness, Henry. Unforgivable rudeness." Annabelle's voice dripped with indignation, each word a precisely aimed dart. "Daddy was mean to Uncle Richard. He made Uncle Richard leave before cake." "Bad Daddy," Lily echoed, her small voice a surprisingly effective weapon, echoing her mother's carefully cultivated grievances. Henry's mind reeled back to the previous evening, the carefully orchestrated birthday dinner party he had planned, the caterers he'd hired, the string quartet he'd booked, all to impress Annabelle and her demanding social circle. The evening had flowed with an artificial ease, a brittle veneer of polite conversation and forced laughter, until Richard Carter arrived, fashionably late, as always. Richard, Annabelle's first love, The name itself was a phantom limb, an ache in Henry's past. Seeing Richard again, after all these years, ignited a familiar insecurity, a sense of inadequacy he thought he'd buried long ago. Richard, with his effortless charm, his roguish smile, and the ghost of a shared history. With Annabelle, always seemed to cast Henry into the role of the dependable, but ultimately less exciting, second choice. Despite the unease churning in his stomach, Henry, ever the dutiful husband, had extended a hand, a strained smile plastered on his face, welcoming Richard into their home, into their lives. But Richard, instead of a reciprocal handshake, had leaned in close, his breath reeking faintly of expensive scotch and something else, something sharper, more calculating, whispering a chillingly confident challenge in Henry's ear. "Mark my words, Henry, Annabelle will be leaving with me tonight. Just watch." The blatant provocation, the smug certainty in Richard's eyes, the casual dismissal of Henry's marriage, ignited a flash of raw, primal anger. He had shoved Richard back, perhaps a bit harder than necessary, a visceral need to defend his territory, his wife, his life, surging through him. Instantly, Annabelle had transformed, her socialite veneer cracking to reveal a raw, furious Annabelle he rarely saw and always dreaded. "Henry, how dare you? Richard is a guest in our home. Apologize this instant for your boorish behavior." She had rushed to Richard's side, placing herself between them, her body a shield, her eyes blazing with a protective fury that should have been reserved for him, her husband. "Annabelle, darling, perhaps I've intruded. Henry clearly isn't thrilled with my presence. I should probably take my leave. You two. Enjoy the rest of your evening," Richard had purred, his voice a masterpiece of wounded innocence, his exit perfectly timed for maximum dramatic effect. He turned and walked away, a wounded stag retreating from a territorial challenge. "Uncle Richard, no, don't go," Lily had wailed, her small face crumpling, tears welling in her eyes, genuine tears of distress for Richard, a man she barely knew, but who represented forbidden treats and exciting outings, things Henry, in his responsible paternal role, often denied her. Annabelle's glare swung back to Henry, a look of pure, unadulterated loathing. With a dramatic flourish, she swept her arm across the perfectly set dessert table, sending the multi-tiered birthday cake, a confectionery masterpiece Henry had commissioned from a Michelin-starred pastry chef, cascading to the floor in a sticky, sugary avalanche. The splattering sound echoed the shattering of Henry's carefully constructed world. Seizing Lily's hand, Annabelle had stormed out, leaving behind a stunned silence, a room full of bewildered guests, and Henry standing amidst the ruins of his wife's birthday celebration, a sticky, humiliating mess. Mother and daughter had vanished into the night, leaving Henry to clean up the wreckage, both literal and metaphorical. And now, they were back, with a paltry peace offering of a Swiss roll, and Annabelle was demanding a divorce. "Richard provoked me, Annabelle. He came here to cause trouble," Henry pleaded, his voice strained, the words feeling weak, inadequate, even to his own ears. He knew, with a sinking heart, that logic, reason, truth were irrelevant in the face of Annabelle's carefully nurtured grievances. "Are you still stewing over that soup I made him last week? Honestly, Henry, he wasn't feeling well. It was a neighborly gesture. Are you really so petty, so insecure, that you're still clinging to that?" Annabelle scoffed, rolling her eyes with practiced disdain. "There's nothing dirty between Richard and me, Henry. Grow up. Are you even a man, with all this pathetic jealousy?" Annabelle launched into a tirade of past slights, real and imagined, her voice escalating, her eyes flashing with a cold fury that chilled him to the bone. "Daddy, you must apologize to Uncle Richard. Promise me, or I'll never forgive you," Lily declared, crossing her tiny arms, her face a perfect imitation of Annabelle's stubborn resolve. "Uncle Richard took Mommy and me to the beach last night. We had a huge cake, bigger than yours, and he bought me so many lollipops and ice creams. You never let me have treats. I hate you, Daddy. Lily continued, her voice rising in a crescendo of childish entitlement, reciting a litany of Richard's perceived generosity and Henry's perceived cruelty. All you ever do is make me practice piano and finish my cumin worksheets. All you do is nag and scold. Mean Daddy. Mean Daddy. Lily finished, sticking out her tongue at him, a gesture of childish defiance that mirrored Annabelle's adult contempt. Listening to Lily's parroted accusations, fueled by Annabelle's resentment and Richard's calculated manipulations, Henry felt a wave of profound defeat wash over him. His attempts at responsible parenting, his efforts to instill discipline and healthy habits, were twisted into weapons against him, ammunition in Annabelle and Richard's carefully orchestrated campaign to dismantle his life. Henry, apologize to Richard, right now, or consider this marriage officially over. Annabelle scooped Lily into her arms, a queen, surveying her defeated kingdom, and swept out of the room, the slam of the bedroom door punctuating her ultimatum with deafening finality. The next morning dawned, gray and cheerless, mirroring the atmosphere in their opulent apartment. Henry rose with a weariness that settled deep in his bones, moving through his morning routine with the mechanical precision of a wind-up toy. He prepared breakfast, a ritual he usually found comforting, now a hollow performance in an empty theater. He laid out Annabelle's favorite artisanal granola and Lily's cartoon-themed cereal, brewed a pot of strong Italian coffee, the aroma usually a welcome start to the day, now a bitter reminder of what was fracturing around him. The silence at the breakfast table was thick with unspoken resentments, a suffocating blanket of disapproval. Annabelle and Lily, united in their displeasure, pointedly ignored him, their faces masks of icy indifference, communicating volumes with their deliberate silence. He attempted a weak smile, a desperate, pathetic attempt to bridge the widening chasm between them, a smile that felt brittle and forced, cracking under the weight of their collective animosity. Lily responded with a withering eye roll, a miniature masterpiece of teenage disdain, perfectly mimicking Annabelle's signature expression. Mommy, I absolutely refuse to let Daddy drive me to school today. Not after he was so beastly to Uncle Richard. He needs to apologize first, Lily announced, planting her tiny hands on her hips, turning her back to Henry with theatrical indignation, a pint-sized diva staging her dramatic walkout. Nor will I allow him to chauffeur me to work. Come, Lily, darling. We'll take a cab. Let's leave this unpleasantness behind, Annabelle declared, rising with regal hauteur, grabbing Lily's hand and sweeping towards the door, leaving Henry standing alone in the sterile silence of the kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee now tainted with the acrid scent of impending loss and the bitter taste of betrayal. From the window, Henry watched them descend the steps of their grand brownstone. And then he saw him. Richard was waiting at the curb, leaning against his gleaming black sports car, a predatory smirk playing on his lips as he opened the passenger door. For Annabelle and Lily, his eyes meeting Henry's briefly, a silent, triumphant taunt passing between them. A fresh wave of anger, hot and suffocating, surged through Henry, but it was quickly followed by a deeper, more debilitating emotion: resignation. In the past, their arguments, though frequent and often extravagant, had always been fleeting storms, theatrical outbursts followed by equally dramatic reconciliations. Perhaps, Henry thought with a desperate sliver of hope, he was indeed being overly sensitive, magnifying a minor spat into a marital crisis, misinterpreting Annabelle's actions and Richard's presence. Maybe this was just another storm to weather, another dramatic performance before the curtain rose again on their carefully constructed life. Clutching at this fragile hope, Henry reached for his phone, scrolling through his online shopping history, seeking a tangible solution, a quick fix to their escalating marital meltdown. The designer handbag he had ordered for Annabelle, a belated birthday gift, a piece offering wrapped in Italian leather and French silk, should be arriving today. A gesture of contrition, a symbol of his willingness to appease. He clung to the desperate hope that this expensive token of affection would be enough to smooth things over, enough to rewind their fractured relationship back to some semblance of normalcy, to the illusion of happiness they had so meticulously maintained. That evening, as the city lights twinkled outside their panoramic windows, Henry presented the handbag to Annabelle. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of genuine pleasure, a rare and precious sight these days, softened her perpetually dissatisfied features. He then produced Lily's long-coveted sparkly ballet shoes, adorned with tiny, glittering crystals, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Lily's face lit up with unadulterated childish delight. She launched herself at him, throwing her small arms around his neck, her earlier resentment momentarily forgotten, calling him Daddy, with a warmth that momentarily melted the icy wall around his heart. Daddy, do you know the real reason Uncle Richard gave Mommy Swiss rolls? Lily asked, snuggling into his lap, a Swiss roll clutched in her small hand, crumbs dusting her cherubic face. Henry shook his head, prompting her to unveil the supposed romantic mystery. Uncle Richard said Swiss rolls were the very first present he ever gave Mommy, ever, when they were sweethearts in college, and Mommy became his girlfriend because of those Swiss rolls. And then Uncle Richard, to show how much he still loves Mommy, opened a whole factory just for Swiss rolls. A Swiss roll factory? Isn't that so romantic, Daddy? Lily recited the carefully rehearsed lines with wide-eyed innocence, her voice brimming with childish awe, completely oblivious to the manipulative undercurrents of Richard's carefully crafted narrative. Watching Lily parrot Richard's saccharine story, Henry felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach, heavier than any indigestion. A 5-year-old couldn't possibly grasp the nuances of romance, especially not the manufactured, self-serving kind Richard was peddling. These were Richard's words, carefully planted in Lily's impressionable mind, seeds of doubt and admiration designed to undermine Henry, to elevate Richard to a mythical, romantic hero in Annabelle's eyes and in Lily's. Daddy, Uncle Richard opened a whole factory for Mommy. What have you ever done for Mommy? Have you ever opened a factory for her? Lily persisted, her wide, innocent eyes fixed on him, echoing Richard's manipulative question with the guileless cruelty of a child. Suddenly, the pieces clicked into place, falling into a disturbing, sickening pattern. The relentless stream of Swiss rolls that had become their default gift for every occasion, for every relative, for every hostess. Annabelle's almost evangelical promotion of the brand, her insistent recommendations to every acquaintance, every social contact. It wasn't just about the Swiss rolls. It was about Richard. It was about subtly, persistently, insidiously weaving Richard back into their lives, into their family, into Annabelle's vulnerable, susceptible heart, using the sugary sweetness of nostalgia as bait. Silly girl, what nonsense are you spouting? Annabelle interjected sharply, snatching Lily from his lap with a sudden, almost frantic movement, her forced smile strained, her eyes darting nervously towards Henry, as if suddenly realizing the dangerous, revealing territory Lily had unwittingly stumbled into. Henry sat in the opulent living room, the weight of the realization crushing him, the saccharine sweetness of the Swiss rolls now leaving a bitter, metallic taste in his mouth, a taste of betrayal, of manipulation, of the slow, insidious poisoning of his marriage. Following Annabelle's strained, superficial acceptance of his peace offering, the uneasy truce manifested in the resumption of Henry's morning ritual of driving Lily to school. The brittle normalcy, however, was shattered one evening when business obligations demanded Henry's presence at a client dinner. The evening stretched late, fueled by rounds of expensive cocktails and the forced bonhomie of business negotiations. He finally secured the lucrative contract, a victory hard won, but at a steep personal cost. Hours later, he collapsed in agony, his body racked with violent stomach cramps, diagnosed with acute gastroenteritis, and rushed to the emergency room. Through waves of searing pain, Henry fumbled for his phone, his fingers clumsy and weak, desperately trying to reach Annabelle. Call after call went unanswered, swallowed by the digital void. Finally, On the ninth, desperate attempt, she picked up, her voice laced with irritation, not concern. "Annabelle, darling, it's me. I'm in the hospital. Acute gastroenteritis. Please, could you come?" Henry gasped, his voice weak, strained, almost a whimper, each word a struggle against the agonizing cramps gripping his abdomen. "Henry, are you actually serious right now? What utter nonsense are you fabricating? What's suddenly wrong with your stomach? Why are you lying to me? What kind of ridiculous game are you playing?" Annabelle's voice exploded with disbelief and anger, her words a cold slap in the face, a brutal dismissal of his genuine distress. He was too weak, too disoriented by pain and betrayal, to even comprehend her bizarre accusations. "Daddy, you're being so annoying. I really don't like you anymore." Lily's petulant voice chimed in from the background, a chorus of childish rejection adding to the symphony of marital discord. "Henry, can you please stop with this childish melodrama? Are you seriously pulling a stunt like this, just for attention? If you're going to throw a tantrum and run away to the hospital for no reason, then just consider us divorced." "I'm done. Completely done," Annabelle declared, her voice dripping with finality, and slammed the phone down, severing the fragile thread of connection, leaving Henry alone in his sterile hospital bed, adrift in a sea of pain, confusion, and escalating despair. The baffling puzzle pieces, however, began to click into place with cruel, sickening clarity as Henry, despite his throbbing head and nausea, compulsively scrolled through his social media feeds. And there it was, Richard Carter's latest self-congratulatory pronouncement, a smug, self-satisfied update dripping with insincere concern and blatant manipulation. "Just mentioned I had a bit of a tummy ache, and instantly, they were both here, rushing to my side, showering me with care. It's truly wonderful to feel so cherished, so loved. A thoughtful little angel and a sweet, devoted darling. Hashtag blessed, hashtag family, hashtag feeling loved, hashtag grateful." Attached were carefully curated photos, each one a calculated jab at Henry's already wounded heart. Photos of Annabelle, domestic goddess mode activated, bustling around Richard's impeccably styled kitchen, stirring a pot of homemade chicken soup, her face a carefully constructed mask of concern. Photos of Lily, perched precariously on a kitchen stool, diligently applying a hot water bottle to Richard's stomach, her brow furrowed in a perfect imitation of adult worry. Scenes of tender domesticity, scenes of nurturing care, scenes of familial intimacy, scenes of a love and devotion Henry had never experienced, never received, from his own wife and daughter. A hollow, bitter laugh escaped his parched lips. It was all so incredibly, painfully, laughably pathetic. The next 2 days dissolved into a blur of discomfort and isolation within the sterile confines of the hospital ward. Annabelle and Lily remained conspicuously absent, their silence deafening, not a visit, not a call, not even a perfunctory text message of concern, just a vast, echoing void where his family should have been. Then, a notification pinged on his phone, a message from Annabelle, cold and dismissive, like a final decree. "Seriously, Henry? Pulling a childish stunt like this, faking illness and running away from home? If you don't want to come back, fine by me. Frankly, it's rather peaceful without your sulking presence. Guess that saying is true. If someone doesn't care about you, they wouldn't notice if you were hanging upside down, would they?" The casual cruelty of her words, the chilling indifference to his physical suffering and emotional devastation, amplified the gnawing physical pain tenfold, twisting the knife of betrayal even deeper. The glib online saying she quoted, a dismissive, almost celebratory remark about emotional neglect, resonated with a brutal, agonizing accuracy. Uncle, Mommy sent me. Mommy said when your tummy hurts, you need something warm and gentle. She made you this rice porridge. It's still warm. She hopes you feel better soon," a small, hesitant voice whispered beside his bed. Henry looked up, his eyes blurry with fatigue and unshed tears. It was a little girl, no older than Lily, her eyes wide and sympathetic, holding out a steaming bowl of rice porridge, the simple offering radiating warmth and genuine kindness. Her name was Emily, the daughter of his roommate, Mrs. Davis, a quiet, unassuming woman in the next bed. Emily's mother, Mrs. Davis, offered a small, kind smile, a silent gesture of support and understanding. He accepted the bowl, the warmth, spreading through his chilled hands, a small, unexpected act of human compassion cutting through the icy isolation that had enveloped him, a tiny flicker of light in his encroaching darkness. The porridge, plain and unpretentious, brought a surprising comfort, both physical and emotional, a balm for his ravaged body and his wounded spirit. He thanked Emily and Mrs. Davis, a genuine warmth blossoming in his chest, a fragile seed of hope in the barren landscape of his despair. Later, during a quiet conversation with Emily, he learned she was also 5 years old, Lily's age. But the similarities ended there. Emily was quiet, considerate, remarkably well-behaved for her age, her demeanor a stark and poignant contrast to Lily's often demanding, spoiled, and increasingly unkind behavior. A nagging doubt, a seed of paternal guilt, began to sprout in Henry's mind. Had he failed as a father? Had his parenting style, his attempts at gentle discipline, somehow contributed to Lily's developing entitlement and lack of empathy? Or was Lily simply a reflection of Annabelle, a miniature version of her mother's self-absorbed, materialistic heart? He unlocked his phone again. Another compulsive, self-flagellating scroll through the digital torment of social media. There it was, Richard Carter's latest saccharine post, a series of photographs depicting an idyllic, impossibly perfect domestic scene. Richard, beaming with faux fatherly pride, was pictured preparing breakfast for Annabelle and Lily, pancakes stacked high, bacon sizzling in a pan, juice glasses sparkling in the morning light. The secret to a woman's heart? Start with her stomach. And having a sweet little angel by your side certainly doesn't hurt. Feeling incredibly blessed and grateful for my beautiful family. Hashtag family goals, hashtag breakfast bliss, hashtag daddy duties, hashtag lucky man. Lily, in the photos, was radiant, her face smeared with syrup, her eyes sparkling with manufactured happiness, her small hand nestled in Richard's. The image pierced Henry like a shard of ice, a chillingly perfect tableau of the life he had lost, the family that had been stolen from him. A wave of profound sadness, laced with a bitter, corrosive undercurrent of resentment, washed over him, threatening to drown him in its icy depths. Discharged from the hospital, weak and emotionally depleted, Henry returned to the office, expecting a return to the familiar routine, a refuge from the chaos of his personal life. He was met, however, with an unsettling silence, a palpable shift in the office atmosphere. His colleagues, people he had worked alongside for years, people he had considered friends, now avoided his gaze, their whispers and hushed conversations following him like accusing shadows, their once friendly smiles replaced by averted eyes and strained politeness. "Didn't you hear? Annabelle quit last week. Said she's moving on to greener pastures," I believe was the phrase she used. Something about joining Richard Carter's venture, a usually chatty colleague finally revealed, breaking the awkward silence, confirming Henry's worst fears with a casual cruelty that stung more than any deliberate malice. Said she needed a change, a fresh start, a more supportive environment. Henry's fists clenched involuntarily, a knot of cold anger tightening in his chest. That evening, Henry returned to their now empty apartment, the silence amplifying the hollowness in his heart. He waited for Annabelle, the confrontation inevitable, the final act in their dissolving marriage. When she arrived, hours later, her face carefully composed, her eyes devoid of any emotion, he finally broke the strained silence. "Why, Annabelle? Just why? Why would you do this? What do you think people will say? What will they think of us?" he demanded, his voice raw with a mixture of hurt, disbelief, and a desperate, futile plea for understanding. Annabelle shrugged, her movements languid, indifferent, as she began applying an expensive face mask, her eyes cold and distant, focused solely on her own reflection in the gilded mirror. Richard needs a capable manager for his expanding business. He offered me a position, a much more lucrative position, I might add. Work is work, Henry. Frankly, darling, what difference does it make where I work? It's just business. It's not just business, Annabelle. It's Richard. It's everything. I forbid it. I absolutely forbid you from working for him, Henry insisted, his voice rising in a desperate, futile attempt to assert some semblance of control, to reclaim some fragment of his shattered authority. Who are you to forbid me, Henry? Really, darling, how utterly archaic. I already tendered my resignation weeks ago. As a matter of fact, I am a free agent, Henry. I can work wherever I please, with whomever I please. It's none of your business. Frankly, darling, you're becoming quite tedious, Annabelle snapped, her tone dismissive, her gaze fixed on her flawless reflection, utterly oblivious to the emotional earthquake she was unleashing in Henry's carefully ordered world. Please, Annabelle, please don't do this. Don't throw everything away. Don't destroy our family for him, Henry pleaded, his voice cracking, reaching for her hand, a desperate, almost pathetic attempt to salvage their crumbling marriage, to pull her back from the precipice of irreversible destruction. He knew with a chilling certainty that this was more than just a job, more than just a career move. This was the final, decisive act, the ultimate betrayal, the definitive severing of their marriage, the death knell of their shared life. I am doing this, Henry, and there is absolutely nothing, darling, that you can do to stop me, Annabelle retorted, shaking off his touch with a shudder of distaste, turning away from him, her back rigid with cold, unwavering resolve. Richard is going places, Henry. He's dynamic, ambitious, successful. Unlike you. You, darling, are stagnant. You're nothing. You're a bore. The words, laced with venomous contempt, sharp and precise as shards of glass, stung more deeply, more agonizingly than any physical blow, shattering the last vestiges of Henry's hope, leaving him standing alone in the ruins of his marriage, stripped bare, emotionally and financially bankrupt. The following days unfolded in a desolate wasteland of silence and estrangement. Annabelle and Lily retreated further into their own self-contained world, their interactions with Henry reduced to curt, functional necessities, clipped exchanges about schedules and logistics, devoid of any warmth, any affection, any semblance of family. The once vibrant apartment, once filled with the sounds of laughter and shared life, now echoed with an oppressive, suffocating chill, a mausoleum of lost love and shattered dreams. Richard became an increasingly frequent, almost daily, fixture, arriving each morning to chauffeur Annabelle to her new job and Lily to school, his presence a constant, taunting reminder of Henry's displacement, his obsolescence, his utter and complete defeat. One morning, as Henry was leaving for work, his steps heavy with resignation, Richard materialized in the hallway, blocking his path, a smug, predatory smile playing on his lips. You know, Henry, I could have Annabelle divorced from you in a heartbeat. Snap my fingers. And you wouldn't even get to keep Lily. Not a chance, Richard said, his voice laced with a chillingly confident arrogance, his eyes glittering with malevolent triumph. Henry stared back, his face impassive, his gaze empty, the fight, the will to resist, drained out of him, leaving behind only a hollow shell of a man. He couldn't muster the energy to argue, to deny Richard's words, to feign a confidence he no longer possessed, hope he no longer felt. Richard, sensing his utter capitulation, chuckled, a low, guttural sound of pure, unadulterated triumph, and sauntered towards the elevator, leaving Henry standing alone in the hallway, hollowed out, defeated, utterly and completely broken. That afternoon, as Henry sat staring blankly at spreadsheets, the numbers blurring into meaningless symbols, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. Lily's school. Dread coiled in his stomach. Mr. Song, we were expecting you for Lily's parent-teacher conference this afternoon. Are you still planning to attend? Parent-teacher conference? Henry had received no notification, no invitation, no whisper of such an event. He had been deliberately, systematically excluded. I wasn't informed. I received no notice, Henry stammered, his voice barely above a whisper, the knot of dread in his stomach tightening into a vice of icy fear. It's quite important for both parents to attend, Mr. Song. It's about Lily's academic progress and her social integration. Please come as soon as you possibly can, the teacher urged, her voice laced with a professional concern that felt oddly detached, almost accusatory. Henry dropped everything, abandoning the meaningless spreadsheets, and rushed to the school, his heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and foreboding. But the scene that unfolded in the brightly lit school gymnasium, amidst the cheerful chaos of parent-teacher conferences, stole the last vestiges of strength from his already weakened limbs, leaving him feeling utterly, devastatingly powerless. Richard was there. Richard, not Henry, was sitting beside Annabelle and Lily, their heads bent together, engaged in some private, intimate conversation. They were laughing, joking, playing a silly hand game, a picture of perfect domestic bliss, a carefully crafted tableau of family unity, a tableau that deliberately, cruelly, excluded him. Lily, perched happily on Richard's lap, her small arms wrapped around his neck, was calling him Daddy, her voice ringing with unadulterated joy, a sound that ripped through Henry's heart like a jagged shard of glass. Henry stood on the periphery of their carefully constructed happiness, an invisible ghost, an unwelcome intruder in their meticulously staged fantasy, a stranger in his own daughter's life. Other parents milled around them, murmuring admiringly, praising their obvious love, their beautiful family dynamic, their perfectly blended family. The teacher, however, a kind-faced woman, with tired eyes, wore a mask of barely concealed shock and confusion, her gaze darting between Henry, standing awkwardly alone, and the perfectly posed trio of Annabelle, Richard, and Lily. Summoning a strength he didn't know he possessed, Henry walked towards them, his footsteps heavy, his heart leaden with a grief that felt almost physical. Annabelle's forced smile faltered, replaced by a cold, dismissive glare, a silent message of icy rejection. Richard doesn't have any children of his own, Henry, as you well know. His ex-wife, tragically, she passed away from cancer some years ago. He just wants to experience what it's like to have a family, to feel included. Don't make a scene, Henry. Don't be difficult, Annabelle explained, her voice laced with condescending patience, as if Henry were being deliberately obtuse, intentionally malicious. I'm just helping him fulfill his paternal dream, Henry. It's a kind thing to do, really. You can go home now. There's really nothing for you here, Annabelle added, turning back to Richard, her arms snaking possessively through his, a blatant display of ownership, a casual dismissal of Henry's very existence. The casual cruelty of her words, the complete disregard for his feelings, felt like a physical wound, a deep, gaping gash in his already bleeding heart. Uncle Richard is my daddy today, Daddy. Today is Uncle Richard's turn to be my daddy. You can just leave now, Daddy. We don't need you here, Lily piped up, her voice sharp and dismissive, pushing Henry away with surprising force, her small hands surprisingly strong in their rejection. Henry looked from Annabelle to Lily, his eyes burning with unshed tears, his heart aching with a pain that was almost unbearable, a physical manifestation of his emotional devastation. What was he to them now? An obstacle? An inconvenience? A discarded relic of a past they were desperate to erase, to rewrite, to completely obliterate? Perhaps I should be the one to leave then. Yes, maybe it's best if I just withdraw. Thank you both. Thank you for letting me share in your dream. It's been enlightening, Richard said, his voice dripping with saccharine sweetness, a false martyr's sigh escaping his lips. He made a theatrical show of standing up, as if prepared to gracefully, selflessly withdraw from their perfectly staged family moment, a performance worthy of an Oscar. Predictably, Annabelle and Lily immediately grabbed his arms, pulling him back into his chair, their protests loud and vehement, their actions perfectly choreographed to maximize Henry's humiliation and Richard's triumphant return. "No, Richard, darling, don't be ridiculous. Don't go. Uncle Richard, please stay. We want you here. I want you here. Henry, can you please, for once in your life, just be mature about this? Richard is going through a difficult time. Henry, can't you just be a little understanding? A little compassionate? Must you always be so selfish, Henry? So utterly, unforgivably selfish?" Annabelle pleaded, her voice laced with exasperated impatience, her eyes accusing, her tone dripping with manufactured disappointment. "Honestly, Henry, you're being quite impossible. Daddy, you're mean. You're a bad daddy. I don't like you anymore. I don't want you to be my daddy anymore. I want Uncle Richard to be my daddy. Only Uncle Richard." Lily shrieked, her small face contorted with childish fury, pounding her tiny fists against Henry's legs, her words, aimed with laser-like precision, piercing the last fragile remnants of Henry's emotional defenses, shattering the carefully constructed walls of stoicism he had erected around his wounded heart. He felt a profound sense of detachment, as if watching this agonizing scene unfold from a great distance. The pain strangely muted, almost unreal, a surreal nightmare he couldn't seem to wake from. "Why don't you just go be Emily's daddy then? She doesn't even have a daddy. Her daddy is dead. She's just a nobody. Nobody wants her." Lily suddenly blurted out, her voice dripping with childish malice, pointing a small, accusing finger towards Emily and Mrs. Davis, who were standing nearby, their faces etched with embarrassment, shame, and profound discomfort. Lily's words, cruel and insensitive beyond her tender years, hung in the air, thick with childish malice, a poisoned dart aimed at an innocent target. Something inside Henry finally snapped, a fragile thread of control breaking under the unbearable weight of their collective cruelty. A surge of protective anger, a fierce, visceral protectiveness directed not at Annabelle or Richard, but at Emily, at Mrs. Davis, at the casual cruelty of Lily's words, propelled him forward. He strode towards Lily, his movements swift, decisive, his face a mask of cold fury, and, for the first time in her spoiled, indulged life, he spanked her bottom, a sharp, stinging swat that echoed in the sudden, stunned silence, a sound of parental authority long overdue, a sound of a heart finally breaking. Lily erupted into a torrent of tears, a volcanic eruption of childish rage and wounded pride, collapsing onto the polished gymnasium floor, writhing and wailing like a spoiled princess dethroned. "I hate you. I hate you. I never want to see you again. I don't want you to be my daddy. I want Uncle Richard. Only Uncle Richard." Lily screamed, her cries echoing through the suddenly silent gymnasium, a childish lament of spoiled entitlement and utter rejection. Richard immediately swooped in, a knight in shining armor rescuing his damsel in distress, scooping Lily into his arms, cradling her against his chest, murmuring soothing, insincere words of comfort, casting triumphant, gloating glances in Henry's direction, a silent declaration of victory, a smug confirmation of his complete and utter conquest. Annabelle rounded on Henry, her beautiful face contorted with a rage that was truly terrifying, her eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to consume her. "How dare you, Henry? How dare you physically strike your own daughter, especially in front of everyone, just for defending a common little girl you don't even know? You are a terrible father, Henry. You don't deserve to be Lily's father. You are a monster. You are a complete and utter disappointment, Henry. I can't believe I ever wasted 6 years of my life married to such a brute. I am filing for divorce, Henry, and I want it done now. This instant." Annabelle spat, her voice trembling with theatrical rage, her words sharp and final, the third and definitive utterance of the dreaded word. This time, however, something fundamental had shifted within Henry. The agonizing pain, The corrosive anger, the simmering resentment, had finally coalesced into a cold, hard resolve, a steely core of determination. The years of relentless compromise, of selfless sacrifice, of unrequited love, had reached their breaking point, the elastic of his endurance finally snapping. He nodded slowly, deliberately, his voice surprisingly calm, almost detached, a voice he barely recognized as his own. Fine, Annabelle. Divorce it is. If that's truly what you want, divorce it is. The words, once unthinkable, once terrifying, now felt strangely liberating. A release from a suffocating burden, a severing of ties that had long been choking him. Good. About bloody time. If you don't divorce me, Henry, you're not even half the man I thought you were. You're pathetic. Annabelle hissed, grabbing Richard's arm, pulling him and Lily away from the scene of domestic warfare, back to their game, their laughter echoing, false and brittle, in the suddenly empty gymnasium, leaving Henry standing alone, amidst the shattered remnants of his marriage, the debris of his life scattered at his feet, a landscape of emotional devastation. Uncle Richard, can you really be my daddy now? Like, forever? I love you so much, Uncle Richard. Lily's voice, sweet and manipulative, drifted back to him, a final, poisoned dart aimed at his already broken heart. Of course, Lily, darling. Anything you want. I love you too, sweetheart, Richard replied, his voice dripping with syrupy insincerity, his eyes meeting Henry's across the vast expanse of the gymnasium, a smug, victorious glint in their depths, a silent, gloating declaration of total and utter victory. He had won. He had taken everything. Richard had indeed won, in his twisted, shallow calculus of victory and defeat. But Henry realized, with a sense of weary, almost detached resignation, that he no longer cared about winning, no longer wanted to play their toxic game. He had lost nothing of true value, nothing he truly cherished. The love he had poured into this marriage, into this family, had been squandered, unappreciated, betrayed, ultimately worthless. Let them have it all. Let them have each other. He was done. Finally, blessedly, done. Uncle Henry, Emily's soft voice, hesitant and kind, broke through his desolate reverie, pulling him back from the abyss of despair. She offered him a small handful of brightly colored candies, her small hand outstretched, her eyes filled with genuine concern, a stark contrast to the calculated cruelty of Lily's rejection. Mommy says when you're sad, candy always makes things a little bit better. These are all the candies I won playing the games. They're all for you, Uncle Henry. Henry knelt down, meeting her earnest gaze, his own eyes still burning with unshed tears. Thank you, Emily, he said, his voice thick with emotion, a lump forming in his throat. That's very kind of you. But won't you eat them yourself, sweetheart? Mommy says little girls shouldn't eat too much candy, Uncle Henry. It's not good for your teeth. She says it causes cavities. I already had one. These are all for you, Uncle Henry. Emily smiled, a sweet, innocent smile that warmed Henry's frozen heart, a tiny spark of genuine human kindness in the vast darkness of his despair, a beacon of hope in the wreckage of his life. He looked at Emily, then back in the direction of Annabelle, Richard, and Lily, their laughter ringing false and hollow in the cavernous gymnasium, cheap imitation of genuine happiness. He had raised Lily for 6 long years, poured his love, his time, his energy, his very soul into her, and yet she had turned on him so easily, so completely, seduced by cheap trinkets, empty promises, and the manipulative charm of a stranger. Emily, a virtual stranger, offered him more genuine kindness, more heartfelt compassion, in a single, simple gesture than Lily had shown him in months, in years. Enough was enough. He had reached his limit. He had given all he could give. It was time to let go. Let them go. Let them have their hollow charade of happiness. He had nothing left to offer them, nothing left to lose. He turned and walked away, leaving behind the wreckage of his marriage, the ruins of his family, walking towards an unknown future, a future that, for the first time in a long time, felt like it belonged to him alone, a future where, perhaps, he could finally find a measure of peace, a glimmer of true, genuine happiness.